Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nancy Drew. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously, Nancy's relationship with her dad is very complicated because obviously the new reveal with the whole Karen situation, which she's swearing like, hey, it didn't happen while your mom was still alive and we were together. It's something that happened afterwards. Obviously, he was alone and hurt, and Karen was there by his side and was kind of a comfort, and eventually it grew into something more. But because of all that, because it was kept secret, Nancy can't help but think like, well, if you're lied about this, what's it say you're not lying about other stuff as well? Which is also interesting because, you could always also make the argument is because, Nancy just probably, I don't know how she necessarily feels. Would she necessarily feel the same way even if he had cut him out and told her? Because it'd be like, whoa, you're moving on this soon from mom and everything. Because like I said, I'm under the impression it's only been like a year, but maybe it actually has been more. But whatever the case, I feel like you'd be hesitant to have your parent kind of move on to a certain extent, especially when it's someone so close to the family. It's like your mom's friend and stuff like that, a friend to the family. I think it'd add a complicated element to it. I'm actually going to be skipping around a lot in this episode, so do forgive me. Obviously, it's actually something interesting where Nancy's dad basically explains the bloody dress in the attic and stuff like that, which he was like, oh, it's because of this. It was from a store. I put food coloring on it. I did to scare you. Like the moment he was saying, I'm like, it's complete and utter BS. My mind immediately goes, okay. I don't believe that Nancy's dad nor her mom had anything to do directly with, the murder, because this is potentially connected to Lucy and whatnot. I'm thinking at the end of the day, and because it's a line that Nancy's dad had said, because Carson was like early in the episode, because obviously you had words coming around about the fact is that Ryan wants to move his wife's body to have someone else do the examination. He wants it in a different place. And it's like, okay, you definitely doing something shifty. He's trying to be like, oh, I want someone more professional or whatever to do it, someone more well-trained. But it's like, no, that's complete another BS. You're having the body moved, most likely to like cover up evidence, which is interesting because like he goes, because obviously he wants to talk to Carson because like, oh, I want you to be my lawyer because you're a good lawyer. And obviously, Carson trying to give him the advice of like, hey, the fact of the matter is you're in a position where it's like, if you do go to trial for Tiffany's murder, these people you kind of look so heavily down upon, these town people, these town folk, these townsies, they will be on the jury. They'll be, and all they'll remember you is as basically some rich douchebag who treats this place like it's just like, oh, it's some quaint little town I venture to every once in a while, like during the summer and stuff like that, because he lets his position and his family position kind of get, hold a lot of credence. And Carson talks about the fact that he's not going to represent him because he made a promise to his wife that they'd never work with a Hudson family again. So that's what ties it back in my brain to be like, yeah, they covered up something for a Hudson a long time ago. Why else would his wife be like, yo, could put a kibosh on ever working with them again? Because they covered some stuff up. Now the question is, what exactly and why, who knows? Because why would you put yourselves in danger? Why? Because the thing is, both of them were involved in whatever this thing is, because that dress came out of that suitcase, which was in the yard. So it's like, what made them decide to dig it up all these years later? I guess because maybe the case kind of went to the wayside. So I don't know. Maybe it isn't even directly related to Lucy. Maybe it's related to someone else, but Lucy's ghost or whatever is kind of trying to point Nancy in the right direction. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe there's more than one, particular thing going on. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But that's immediately where my mind like, yeah, the Hudsons have to be behind this. Like, what other reason? But also, like I said, along the time, why was his wife involved? If he, he was a lawyer or whatever, why wasn't he just involved? But I guess it's like, if you're going down, I'm going to make sure you're covered too, because I don't want because if the Hudsons go down, he'd get taken down for tampering with evidence. So maybe she's trying to have his back, where it's kind of like, I don't want you to go to jail. I love you and I care about you. Obviously, I don't want Nancy to lose her dad either. That might have put a strain on the relationship, granted, we don't know the full scope, because the way Nancy kind of made it seem like, her dad wasn't really there when her mom was kind of sick. It's almost like he was working. Maybe it was guilt or something. Maybe he thought like, oh, this is karma getting me back for potentially interfering with a murder case and all that. So there's that whole thing on top of it. So there's that. Her dad did drop some interesting information, basically telling her, it's like, because obviously she's worried about the whole Nick situation because it's like she likes Nick, and then the fact of the matter is now he's also a possible suspect. He has the biggest motive because Tiffany testified against him, but without going into exacts and kind of talking from a hypothetical standpoint, basically he confirms the fact is that Nick never knew it was Tiffany who testified against him, like her identity was hidden because he was Nick's lawyer. And the reason why he didn't want Nancy involved, because it's like, you literally still dealing with the whole loss of your mom. I want you to put your life back on track and not get mixed in with a kid who's got a complicated past of his own that's going to be constantly following him, potentially for the rest of his life, so the shadows of the past have a tendency to kind of follow you, so I'm thinking that's kind of, he's just looking out for her from not the sense of like, oh, he's a terrible person, because obviously he knows the ins and outs of whatever the case was. It's interesting too, because he made note of like, it's a high profile case. He's like, what does that mean? Does that also mean this is something connected to the Hudsons? Maybe potentially, I don't know. I mean, because I don't know, like there might be many different connections in that regard, because this particular case might be, Nick's case might be something related to the Hudsons, which is why his wife was like, never work with the Hudsons again. I wonder, was that like a last minute thing while she was sick? Was this way before now? Either way, there's so many angles to this whole situation. Obviously, you have Nancy working with George, Bess, and Ace to break into the morgue because she wants to get a blood sample from Tiffany before the body ends up getting taken by the morgue. I mean, this other, coroner comes to pick it up and move it to the new place because they don't know what's going to be tampered with. So it's like, hey, let's check and see if there's something in her blood to kind of let us know what exactly potentially killed her. Maybe it's some drugs in her system. It's also interesting too, because I really like the fact that they immediately show you that, Nancy's kind of already on top of this, kind of the suspicions and stuff like that. You kind of get left with last episode of like, oh, what does this mean? What's this and that mean? Like Nancy's already on top of it. She's like, Ace, he's not as dumb as he makes himself seem to be. He's a lot smarter than he seems. Bess, it's like, she says she's staying with a wealthy aunt, but if you're so working with a wealthy aunt, if you're staying with an aunt that's so wealthy and well off, it's like, then why are you working here? And then obviously there's a whole thing about George, and it's like George has got secrets, like the whole being in a relationship with an older man in high school. That's the rumor that spread. And I figured as much because of the reveal at the end, the last episode being like, oh, George and Ryan are a thing. So that's interesting. You actually kind of feel bad for her on a certain level of like, oh, she's there. And then like, oh, Ryan's just kind of taking a call and she's just looking and all the pictures are over him and Tiff. Well, some are like just Tiffany, some are just him and Tiffany. And so it's got to be hard, just kind of like, yeah, it's still such a fresh new thing. It's like, so she probably feels a little bad of like, oh, I'm here. Yeah, your wife's dead and everything. So it probably leads to a very interesting, complicated situation and feeling, I suppose, Obviously, Nancy kind of picks up on it when George is kind of like, oh, I know where Ryan is because we need to get his phone. We can get the phone, pretend like we work for Ryan, and we're canceling the coroner order. That way we can get into the morgue. I thought that was kind of interesting, and that George kind of let it slip that she kind of knows where it is. But she tries to make an excuse to be like, well, I cut through the woods all the time, so that's why I know. But Nancy kind of put two and two together, showing, yeah, she's not, once again, just showing how her mind works, because she knew to follow George just to kind of make sure it's like, wait a minute, the man, you were dating an older man in high school. Now there's this whole situation. You're quick to kind of defend Ryan a lot. Plus this, knowing exactly where he would be at this time. It's like, there's something there. And if there's a relationship between you two, I have to be careful because maybe there's a situation where you might choose defending him over helping us kind of clear our names and potentially reveal him to be a killer, which turns out to be the case because George wanted to believe Ryan of like, oh, like basically she struggled with drugs. I don't want some scandal to come back on my family because of that. So she gives him back his phone and Nancy watches and she ends up confronting George about it, which obviously George is pissed off because it's like, oh, you suspect me. Oh, maybe they're even saying that I might be the murderer and everything. But it's also because it's a reminder to George how Nancy treated her. It wasn't necessarily Nancy. It was her friends of like, yeah, they'd call her a slut. And when she sit up, they'd wipe down her seat and stuff like that. Kids, they're assholes, and teenagers, major assholes. But nevertheless, it's like, yeah, you weren't the bad guy in this situation in the sense that, like, you weren't the one saying all this stuff, spreading rumors, sure, but you're just as bad because you didn't say anything, And it's like, oh, you want to judge me and look at me like that? Well, where are those friends of yours now? Because even, Nancy was like, oh, they were just being idiots. Yeah, well, those idiot friends of yours, where are they now? Oh, yeah, that's right. They abandoned you because what? You became the girl whose mom died. And it's like, ugh, that's kind of rough throwing it in her face. But obviously, George is, upset about the whole thing. Like, it's something, she's held on to. That's why she has such a grudge against Nancy, is because of that. And it's like, hey, here's Ace and Bess. If you want to go ahead and tell them, go ahead and tell them now that you've kind of got it all figured out. Which obviously, Nancy didn't say anything because obviously, like, she didn't spread the rumors last, in that, when they were younger. And obviously she's not trying to do that now because she's not trying to hurt George. The fact of the matter is, I guess she didn't think at the time of like, oh, I wasn't doing anything. It's like, oh, some stupid stuff my friends are saying I didn't agree with. I didn't go with the flow. But the fact is, it's kind of that thing of like, well, just because, even if you're a bystander in this situation, the fact is that you are kind of rolling with this crew, their actions and the things that they do kind of fall back on you, especially if you don't kind of be like, whoa, slow the hell down, guys. So there's that whole situation with that. I think Nancy had never really thought about it. I mean, and also knew how much like stuff got thrown George's way because of like all that was said and all the rumors that were spread about. I'm really curious to kind of dive into this whole like friend situation because they're probably not in town anymore. They're probably well off, so they're probably off on college or something like that, I'm assuming. I'm interested to see if we'll ever see them pop up, kind of like I said, because we got introduced to them in like the very first episode because they were the two girls as well as the guy that was her friends and her boyfriend at the time, like, like I said, that was her in high school, so that was probably like, her being prom queen or something, or rather Miss Horse Shore, like I said, whatever that case may be. It was actually a pretty good plan. It kind of went through. Obviously, it kind of fell apart near the end, but obviously, when it came to distracting the coroner, Bess and Ace did their side of things, which there was some kind of reveals in that instance I thought was kind of neat. Like, we learned, like, oh, where things kind of stand between Bess and Ace, because he started realizing it, like, it's just like, oh, like the look on Bess's face when it came to the whole Elizabeth situation, the coroner that was helping him, everything's like, oh, and even Ace was like, oh, okay, I'm kind of figuring this out. And it's like, oh, he's like, the fact of the matter is we're good, whatever your situation is. And she's like, for her, she's never really dated boys or girls. It's just a complicated situation has kind of ever prevented her from really stepping out of her shell like that, which we kind of dive into that a little bit. But I do appreciate the fact that Ace is like, no, I'm fine with just being kind of like, I'll be your anchor, kind of, your platonic friend and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of neat. Even later on, but like, yeah, we were back there getting, some stuff so you can ship the body parts and stuff, like obviously the blood and stuff to kind of get tested. And Ace is like, yeah, we were back there as friends. And Bess is like, don't make it weird. So I think that's kind of a neat element to it as well. Obviously, there's the continuation of like the whole McGinnis and, Ace situation. Obviously, we still haven't figured what that is out exactly, but it is a situation of, it's so interesting. He's so against Nancy, yet he's actually telling him like, oh, let me know what happens in the morgue. I mean, to be fair, because I'm about to say not unless he's playing multiple sides. I'm about to say not unless he's secretly working for Ryan, but it's like, no, he working with McGinnis, but still, like, I guess because she's a suspect, he can't show favoritism because he doesn't think that she's involved, but he thinks maybe using her in this position that she'll be so motivated to clear her name. Maybe he also wanted to test her because he felt like she might have been rusty because she has kind of left this whole detective thing behind for a while. So whatever the case may be, I'm very kind of interested to kind of learn his motives of why he's kind of going such a roundabout way with this whole investigation to a certain extent, but we'll see. Then on top of all of that, there's a whole situation of like Nancy ended up finding out the last number that Tiffany had contacted and was texting or talking to at the very least. And so it turns out to be a phone that belongs to Nick. Obviously, Nancy doesn't know it at this time. So the big question then comes like, okay, so what's that all about? Obviously, Nick probably didn't know about Tiffany being like the one that testified against him, but it's like there's some kind of something dealing with a package, which part of me is wondering is like, is that something like, is what he got accused of what is it in some shape or form associated with the Hudsons? So is that where the kind of connection comes into play in that regard? Because I don't know. I'm interested to find out like what that's all about. There's so many mysteries kind of stacking upon themselves. It's like, wait, what's this mean now? You know? So that's a whole other thing because it's like, okay, so he had motive to kill her, but actually they were working together. But the motive thing could be like, well, the thing is he got in contact with her. He probably found out that she was the one that testified again. That could be, you know, the new argument, even though it seems like he's clearing out, at least in Nancy's book. So it's almost like, oh, so he'll never find out that she found out about his past. But it's like, no, that's still going to rear its ugly head at some point in time because she's going to have to reveal it to be like, I know, why don't you have to tell me the truth? I need to know. She says, tell me in your own time, but eventually it's going to get to the point where it's like she needs to know. So we'll see what kind of complications that lead. I talked about it, kind of left off from it, but was the whole Bess situation of like, at the end, you see her kind of trying to contact Elizabeth, like, oh, we should get dinner, but she's afraid to take that step forward because she's living out of a van and stuff like that. So the question is it like, did her family kick her out, or is it a situation of like her family, you know, because it's like, why is she living on her own? Like, I guess like, or it might just be the fact that she's a straight up runaway. Maybe her parents don't even know where she is, but she's making it seem like, oh, I'm living here with an aunt or whatever. I'm good, you know? So, but the thing is, why lie about that? Well, I mean, obviously you don't want people to know, like I said, she's got this image or perception she wants to keep up, almost making it seem like she comes from a wealthy family, but maybe her family kind of is dirt poor. Maybe they kind of stole a lot, and now that's how she's lived most of her life, and she's just, you know, ashamed to actually admit that. Like, obviously she's gotten arrested for it before, but obviously, as we saw with the whole Tiffany thing, she stole a ring last episode, so it's like what that means. So there's that. Obviously, there's Carson burning the dress, further proving like everything he said to Nancy was BS. It's so sad too because they had that heart to heart. He was like, "Oh yeah, I paid your bill like an hour ago," but the fact of the matter is, I just needed an excuse so that we can actually just talk. You know, not having you kind of be silent or walking away. You know, he got the money because he's now working. He reluctantly had to take the job from Ryan representing him because that was the only way he was going to be able to pay for Nancy's bail, which now, you know, Nancy feels a little guilty because it's like, oh, you didn't want to work with him. He even made a point that he didn't want to work with him. But then it's like now he had to because he's like, I will do anything. Because she said, oh, you even had to sell your soul to the devil. It's like, he's like, I would do anything for you, you know? Which I'm also guessing that includes whatever this whole Lucy situation or that bloody dress situation is. I guess that's about protecting Nancy in a certain extent too. Kind of, you know, once again, it's like, well, it's probably connected to the promise made to her mom and everything. I don't know. There's so much to it. There's also the George situation because for George, she kind of is like the reason why she helped out Nancy because it's like, oh, like I realized that, you know, Ryan is a secretive person. He does have something to hide. Me, like the fact of the matter is like, oh, he tried to keep it super, super extra platonic. He didn't even want to like entertain the idea like, oh, they knew each other ahead of time. He was almost kind of like, oh, no, we can't be seen in public together at all. Even under the circumstances of like, even you just coming over to shake my hand just to pretend like some friendly introductions. It's like, no. And it's like in that moment is what changed things for George because it's like, oh, he is, that's all I'm ever going to be, a dirty secret to him. The fact of the matter is I thought it was Tiffany the moment she was out of the picture. It's like, hey, I'd be number one, you know, sadly thought of herself as like, oh, I'd finally be out. I'd be able to walk beside you. I care about you so much. You obviously care about me. It's like, no, I'm always going to be that secret for you. So it does seem like, you know, there's that, you know, sad side of things for, you know, George, but I think she's better off because even Nancy was kind of like, you know, you deserve better. She's like, yeah, I know I do. She's like, my actions don't always reflect that, but I know I do. And so, I mean, at the very least, the silver lining to this situation is it does seem like it is going to be, this situation is bridging that gap between Nancy and George at the very least. So I think that's something you can at least take solace in knowing. But what was interesting though is the fact is that, like, obviously the whole like water bucket ritual thing of her kicking it, like obviously it's supposed to be like if it's water that means like, oh, everything's gonna be good, but if there's blood that means someone's gonna die in that next year. George got It's that, and obviously I don't think George is just living there by herself. I mean, maybe she is, but I mean, it just means that someone in her household is going to die. But the fact is, they haven't really introduced any family, and kind of makes you think like that's supposed to represent the fact it's just George potentially, which is like, that's not good. So I was actually kind of surprised. I thought it would be kind of like, I wouldn't have expected George. I would have expected it to be like something in like Nancy's home or something like that, like Nancy, her dad or something like that. But no, George. So, I mean, obviously that might be relevant to whatever this whole Hudson situation is. Like maybe something about Ryan will kind of lead to him potentially trying to get rid of George because for whatever reason, I don't know, or maybe it's just supposed to be foreboding circumstances or like some, just in general, like never says like, oh, it's going to be like a murder situation. It just means that you're going to sadly die. So we'll see what ends up happening on that front. Then there's the whole, well, it's something I haven't talked about. Obviously, once again, the supernatural element to this is interesting because obviously Nancy's like, maybe I'm crazy, but obviously there's stuff that keeps popping up. She sees the blood underneath the coroner's car, and then she sees her reflection and it's Lucy, and she's been seeing her over and over again all over the place, which begs to, there was even that creepy moment in the morgue, which is like kind of sad. She had to keep seeing, it's like, oh, not body number 1, whoa, not body number 2, and lucky body number 3, oh, but what's body 4 over here? Oh, it's nothing, it's empty, and the door creaks open and everything. It's like, yep, I show super creepy. So it's like, okay, that's interesting. So now, Nancy's starting to think like maybe there's something to that. Because obviously Ace and Bess believe, but she doesn't. Because I think, she's all about kind of the more rational thought of like, there's got to be an explanation for it type of thing. But like, even the thoughts kind of creeping into her mind of like, either this is all in my head or I'm being haunted. But it's like, hey, maybe Lucy wants me to solve her murder along with Tiffany's. And she's even kind of said in her mind of like, I'm going to solve your murder too to figure this whole thing out. Which obviously that means potentially crossing paths with her dad and whatever secrets he's having or holding. So there's a lot to kind of take going forward into the next episode. So I'm curious what ends up happening, where this all does in fact take us. Sorry about that. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good